Reading through the Bible in 1 year, May 10th, Numbers 19, Psalms 56 through 57, Isaiah chapter 8, verse 1 through chapter 9, verse 7, and James chapter 2. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, This is the statute of the law which Yahweh has commanded, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, that they take to you a red heifer, without blemish, in which is no defect, and on which a yoke has never been placed. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be brought outside the camp, and be slaughtered in his presence. Next, Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its hide and its flesh and its blood, with its refuse, shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet material, and cast it into the midst of the burning heifer. The priest shall then wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward come into the camp. But the priest shall be unclean until evening. The one who burns it shall also wash his clothes in water, and bathe his body in water, and shall be unclean until evening. Now, a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and deposit them outside the camp in a clean place. And the congregation of the sons of Israel shall keep it as water to remove impurity. It is purification from sin. And the one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until evening. And it shall be a perpetual statute to the sons of Israel, and to the sojourner who sojourns among them. And the one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. That one shall purify himself from uncleanness with the water on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, he will not be clean. Anyone who touches a corpse, the body of a man who has died, and does not purify himself, makes the tabernacle of Yahweh unclean, and that person shall be cut off from Israel. Because the water for impurity has not been splashed on him, he shall be unclean, for his uncleanness is still on him. This is the law when a man dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent, and everyone who is in the tent, shall be unclean for 7 days. And every open vessel, which has no covering tied down on it, shall be unclean. Also, anyone who is in the open field, verse 16. Anyone who in the open field touches one, or who has been slain with a sword, who has died naturally, or a human bone, or a grave, shall be unclean for 7 days. Then the unclean, it's just been one of these days, just putting it out there. Verse 17, we're going to do this. Then, for the unclean person, they shall take some of the ashes of the burnt purification from sin, and flowing water shall be added to them in a vessel. And a clean person shall take hyssop, and dip it in the water, and sprinkle it on the tent, and on all the furnishings, and on the persons who were there, and on the one who touched the bone, or the one slain, or the one dying naturally, or the grave. Then the clean person shall sprinkle on the unclean the 3rd day, and on the 7th. And on the 7th day he shall purify him from uncleanness. And he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and shall be clean by evening. But the man who is unclean, and who does not purify himself from cleanness, that person shall be cut off from the midst of the assembly, because he has made the sanctuary of Yahweh unclean. The water for impurity has not been splashed on him. He is unclean. So it shall be a perpetual statute for them. And he who sprinkles the water for impurity shall wash his clothes, and he who touches the water for impurity shall be unclean until evening. Furthermore, anything that the unclean person touches shall be unclean, and the person who touches it shall be unclean until evening. Remember the difference that we talked about before with cleanness. Things that are clean are that which are life or produce life. Um, and that which is unclean are things that typically are death or produce death or are produced by death. All right. Let's move on now to Psalms 56 through 57. Be gracious to me, O God, for man has trampled upon me. All day long an attacker oppresses me. My foes have trampled upon me all day long, for many attack me proudly. When I am afraid, I will trust in you, in God, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can mere man do to me? All day long they distort my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They attack, they lurk, they watch my heels, as they have hoped to take my life. On account of their wickedness, will they have an escape? In anger, bring down the peoples, O God. You have taken account of my wanderings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise. In Yahweh, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? Your vows are binding upon me, O God. I will fulfill thank offerings to you. For you have delivered my soul from death. Indeed, my feet from stumbling, so that I may walk before a God in the light of the living. Psalm 57. Be gracious to me, O God. Be gracious to me, for my soul takes refuge in you. And in the shadow of your wings I will take refuge until destruction passes by. I will call to God Most High, to God who accomplishes all things for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He reproaches him who tramples upon me. Selah. God will send his loving kindness and his truth. My soul is among lions. I am lying down among those who breathe forth fire. Sons of men whose teeth are sharp, whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword. Be exalted above the heavens, O God. Let your glory be above all the earth. They have set a net for my steps. My soul is bowed down. They dug a pit before me. They themselves have fallen into the midst of it. Selah. My heart is set, O God. My heart is set. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises. Awake, my glory. Awake, harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your loving kindness is great to the heavens, and your truth to the skies. Be exalted above the heavens, O God. Let your glory be above all the earth. Now, Isaiah chapter 8, verse 1 through chapter 9, verse 7. Then Yahweh said to me, take for yourself a large tablet, and write on it in ordinary letters concerning Maher-shalal Hashbaz. And I will take to myself faithful witnesses for testimony, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah. How does the ESV do this one? Yep, Jeberechiah. There we go. Verse 3. Then I drew near to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then Yahweh said to me, call his name Maher-shalal Hashbaz. For before the boy knows how to cry out, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. Again, Yahweh spoke to me further, saying, inasmuch as these people have rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloh, and rejoice in Rezin and the son of Remaliah. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord is about to bring on them the mighty and abundant waters of the river, the king of Assyria and all his glory. And it will rise up over all its channels and go over all its banks. Then it will sweep on into Judah, and it will overflow and pass through. It'll reach even to the neck. And the spread of its wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Be broken, O peoples, and be shattered. Give ear, all remote places of the earth. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Devise counsel, but it will be thwarted. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. For thus Yahweh spoke to me with a strong hand and disciplined me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, You are not to say, it is a conspiracy. In regard to all this people, to all that this people call a conspiracy. And you are not to fear what they fear, and you shall not tremble. It is Yahweh of hosts whom you should regard as holy. And he shall be your fear, and he shall be your cause of trembling. Then he shall become a sanctuary, but to both the houses of Israel, to a stone to strike and a rock to stumble over, and a snare and a trap for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many will stumble over them, and then they will fall and be broken. They will even be snared and caught. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, and I will wait for Yahweh, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope for him. Behold, I and the children whom Yahweh has given me are for signs and wonders in Israel from Yahweh of hosts, who dwells on Mount Zion. Now, when they say to you, Inquire of the mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn. And they will pass through the land hard pressed and hungry. And it will be that when they are hungry, they will be angry and curse their king and their God as they face upward. Then they will look to the earth and behold distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be banished into thick darkness. But there will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In earlier times he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. But later on he shall make it glorious by the way of the sea, on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in the land of the shadow of death, the light will shine on them. You shall multiply the nation. You shall make great their gladness. They will be glad in your presence, as with the gladness of the harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you shall shatter the yoke of their burden, and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their taskmaster, as at the battle of Midian. For every boot of the booted warrior in the rumbling of battle, and cloak rolled in blood, will be for burning, fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of Yahweh of hosts will accomplish this. There's all the notes. Let's move on now to James chapter 2. James continues, My brothers, do not hold your faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ with an attitude of personal favoritism. For if a man comes into your assembly, think church, right, with a gold ring and dressed in bright clothing, and there also comes a poor man in dirty clothes, and you pay special attention to the one who is wearing the bright clothing and say, "You sit here in a good place," and you say to the poor man, "Just stand over there or sit by my footstool." Have you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, did not God choose the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Is it not the rich who oppress you, and they themselves drag you into court? Do they not blaspheme the good name by which you have been called? If, however, you are fulfilling the royal law according to Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin, being convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in one point, he has become guilty of it all. For he who said, "Do not commit adultery," also said, "Do not murder." Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law, the whole law. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged by the law of freedom. For judgment will be merciless to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Again, lots of great notes in this section. Strongly recommend reading it. Let's get to the struggly bit for most people. So what use is it, my brothers? If someone, excuse me. Okay. What use is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but he has no works? Can that faith save him? Or if a brother or a sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace and be warmed and filled," yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body. You don't give them food. You don't give them what they need to stay warm. You don't give them what they need to be filled. Well, what use is that? Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead by itself. You might stop and go, whoa, 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 hold on. I know Ephesians chapter 2 and Ephesians chapter 1 and all of what Romans said. You said that we are saved apart from works, that our doing of works can't obtain for us our salvation. That's right. What's being said here is not that you must work in order to obtain salvation, or, as our Catholic brethren like to believe, you must do works in order to maintain your salvation. That if you don't continue to do these works, if you don't continue to go to a confession and take Mass and all of these things, then you might find yourself in purgatory for a long time, which, by the way, I've been looking in the Bible. I still haven't yet found purgatory, but I've only been doing it for, 15 years. Maybe this will be the one time I find it. But what do we see instead? We see here clearly that works are important. And it's true, they are. Works are very important. But why are they important? It's not the works that establish your faith, right? The works don't produce your faith for you. You can't do a bunch of things and then God goes, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you're good." And then he lifts up your faith value. You aren't first saved by faith, and then you have to supplement with works, meaning that you don't, that the works you produce are done by you in order to maintain your good standing with God so that he'll continue to save you. What do we see in here? Well, rather, what do we see here instead? As we're going to go through it, and as has already been shown, works are the natural production of faith. Follow me here. If you didn't believe God was real, right? If you were just an atheist, would you care what it is that God tells you to do? No. You're just going to live your life however you want. And if by living your life however you want, you happen to, this is me paraphrasing Romans here, but Romans chapter 3, if you on your own end up following the law of God, right? Just choosing on your own to do this without fearing God. If you choose to do that, then it becomes a law for you, right? But does it produce salvation? No. In fact, if you live your whole life absolutely perfectly, from the moment you are conceived until the moment of your death, right? As James just said a minute ago, if you violate one of the laws of God, it doesn't matter. It is as if you have failed all of them. Again, as I used to tell children when I would teach this to them, if you're standing in the dead center and you have 10 cannons all the way around you, and each one of them will be triggered by you violating the law of God, and each one of them is right next to your body, right? You're standing in the middle and you can touch each of the cannons. How many of those cannons have to go off for it to kill you? One, right? You might die of fear before it even happens. But only one of those has to go off and it'll kill you. Same thing with the law. If you violate one of the laws of God, it's as if you violated all of it. It doesn't matter. You violated the law. So your works, unless you are absolutely perfect from the moment you're conceived until your last breath, always honoring God in all your thoughts and all your desires, right? Only ever doing that which most glorifies God in all that you do. Never once looking at yourself and doing something for you, if it might slightly offend somebody else. You still want to, you only do that which most glorifies God in everything. You never took something that didn't belong to you. You never lusted after someone who you weren't married to. You always honored your parents and all that they did. You have never once looked at something that someone else had and been like, that's not fair. If you've lived a perfect life from the moment you were conceived until the moment of your death, congratulations. You have kept the law, but you've earned nothing more. God doesn't have any right, or rather, God doesn't have any need to provide you entrance into his heaven. Nothing will be lauded upon you. Congratulations, good slave. You've done your job. That's it. Works cannot. Let's put it this way. By doing good, you're doing that which coincides with the law of God. So, living your life perfectly according to the law of God, again, from the moment you were conceived until the moment of your death, you're not earning anything for yourself. So when you sin, you're not earning back from that. You can't unlie, you can't unsteal, right? You can apologize for stealing, you can give the thing back, but you've already broken that trust. You can apologize for lying, but you've already broken that trust. It cannot be redeemed or rebuilt. People will always know that you were a liar and a thief. Those will always hang out in the back of their heads. They know that they could trust you around things, but not too much. Works, even if done perfectly, don't buy you anything. However, faith plus works, maybe that's what does it. I have faith, and then I have my works to supplement my faith in God. Therefore, now I'm earning something from God. No. Because as we'll later read in Isaiah, our works are like filthy rags before God. What does filthy rags mean? Well, we've already read about all that is unclean before God, and how women have a longer purification when they're in their menstrual cycle because of the uncleanness that's produced. The term that's actually used for those rags, those filthy rags, are used menstrual cloths. That's our very best work that we could ever produce, is the most unclean thing that you could imagine. It's worse, actually, than a dead body. So what is this then about faith and works? Well, the person who believes in God, the person who has been converted, the person who has been who is elect of God, who has the Holy Spirit residing within them, who acknowledges that God is real, who along with Jesus, when he said, not along with Jesus, not that he needed this, but what Jesus said about the person who owed an unimaginable amount of money to the king, who then begged the king to forgive his debt. Again, he owed more than all of the money that existed on the planet at the time. That's how much money it is that he owed. And he went to the king and he said, "Will you please forgive me, because I can't pay this debt?" And he forgave the debt. And he went out and immediately, when somebody who owed him just a little bit of money, just a couple months' wages, which is nothing compared to this, when he saw him, and when the guy said, "Please have mercy with me, give me time to pay this off," he condemned him immediately. We agree with Jesus that this is wrong, because when we look at our own sin, we can't work our way out of debt with God. Again, you can't unlie, you can't unsteal, you can't stop the fact that your heart constantly wants to serve itself rather than serve God, which is a constant violation of the first three laws of the Ten Commandments. So what happens is, when you are a Christian, you acknowledge these things. You know that you can't save yourself through doing good. You know that it's only Jesus who could purchase your salvation for you. You know you don't deserve it, because you know your sin debt, or at least a portion of it that God has revealed to you. You know your sin debt before God, that you cannot earn your way into his heaven. That you can't find some way to convince God that you're a good person, because you know yourself that you're not. You don't deserve it. You can never pay off your debt before him. Therefore, who are we to condemn anybody around us? It is this realization of the grace of God and the mercy of God in his salvation given to you that leads you naturally to love people more. When you see somebody who's struggling in sin, you feel bad for them. You show mercy to them because Jesus showed mercy to you. You care for people who you normally didn't care about before. Your money becomes as nothing really to you. You're not worried about accumulating for yourself wealth. You're seeing how you can better serve other people in your community with it. You're no longer being a miser holding on to it. You're freely giving it to whomever has need. These are the works that naturally flow out of the heart of a believer. I 100% agree with both Paul and James. We are not saved by works, but if we have no works, then what good is our faith? Jesus himself said that they, meaning the world, will know us, will be able to recognize that you have been with Christ, that you are a Christian by your fruit. So what kind of fruit do you produce in your life? Are you constantly bad-mouthing people behind their backs? Do you race to go gossip? Do you use prayer meetings as an opportunity to gossip about other people? Oh, I have a prayer request for Nancy. Yeah, looks like her husband's getting back into porn again, so we really need to pray for them. No. Just pray to God for what's happening there. Just seek to serve other people in your community. Is that what you naturally do? When you see someone at church who has a need, do you immediately go to your car and take out what you have? Or do you go home and come back that next week and tell them, hold on, wait, next week I have something for you? Do you bake food for them? Make food for people in your church who are at a point where they need something? Do you take care of the people in your circle of influence? These are things that flow naturally out of you. You shouldn't do it out of a fear of God disavowing you. You shouldn't do it out of a misunderstanding of how salvation works, that you think that you're maintaining your salvation by doing these good things. You certainly shouldn't do it thinking that, well, I'm building up walls for myself in my mansion in heaven. I'm going to have a golden chapel to myself once I get there. Because as we said yesterday, everything gets cast before God. We maintain nothing. Faith, if it has no works, is dead by itself. Why? Because the works reveal the truth of that faith. Verse 18. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without the works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. Well, you believe that God is one. Well, you do well. The demons also believe and shudder. But are you willing to recognize, you foolish fellow, that faith without works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up Isaac, his son, on the altar? Hold on. Now we're talking about justification, right? All this justification is that we see here is that his, make sure I don't lose notes. No, we're good. All that's showing here is that that's the revealing of his faith. That's what it means. His faith is being revealed, is being manifested by the work. Well, how was that with this point? Remember what Abraham was doing. He had his child of promise, the child who was been promised to him that he would have. He's 110 years old when his wife gave birth. He was 100 years old. She was 90, right? So years down the road, God says you must take your child, your only child, not talking Ishmael, we're talking Isaac, the child of promise, and you must take him up on this mountain and sacrifice him to me. And Abraham said, what day do you want me to do it? And he left. And he went and he was going to sacrifice his son. Why? Because he knew, he had faith in God that this is the child of promise, that there will be no other child through which all of these promises of God will come about. And if God decides that I should kill this child, he will also raise this child back up. He wasn't saved because of this. His works in being willing to sacrifice his child. Again, this isn't prescriptive. This is descriptive. We've talked about that before. Right? We're not telling you to go sacrifice your children. Please don't do that. But what do we see instead? What is shown here? Abraham's faith in God was revealed by his works. These works flowed naturally from the heart of someone who understood and trusted in God. Verse 22. You see that faith was working with his works, and as a result of works, his faith was perfected. What does that mean? It just means it was made complete. It was shown to be completed. Verse 23. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Well, where does this come from? This comes from Genesis 15, verse 6. This is way before he actually did the thing. This isn't cherry-picking verses. This is going back to when God made the promises to Abraham. Genesis 15 is where we get, is the Abrahamic covenant itself, that God cuts with Abraham, where God promises to give him, a land for himself and more descendants than he can count. These are the promises given to him. This is God speaking to him. And what happens? Abraham believed God. Abraham trusted that God would do what he said he would do. And it was counted to him as righteousness. This is before circumcision. This is before anything else. And well before, decades before, the child of promise was born, whom he would later go to sacrifice, proving his faith in God. Once again, rereading verse 23 here. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. You see that man is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? We'll get to that story. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. All right, that's it. That's all the text, and that is all the notes for today as well. So God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.